Okay, I have a few minutes, so I wanted to talk about TK and kindergarten. So that's the number one question we're getting right now is our cutoff age, because the California Department of Ed has changed the TK standards so that technically, right now, you have to be kindergarten eligible, you have to be 5 by September 1st. Previously, TK was turning 5 either by December 1st or December 31st, depending on where you were. And if you were in a private school or if you were in a private preschool, it was obviously very different. They could make their own rules. So when TK started, it was very controversial. My child is a February birthday. When they were going into kindergarten, all of their best friends were December, November, and September birthdays. So 4 kids, 3 TK, 1 in a regular forest class in preschool. Actually, it's preschool, Shepherd of the Hills, where we are. And these guys got TK, and this guy was just in a forest class. But all 4 of them were going to kindergarten together. And the controversy, the arguments against it were, you're now taking the youngest student, who is developmentally, age-wise, the lowest, and you are giving these 3 an advantage because they're in a transitional kindergarten classroom, and this little guy is in a forest classroom, which is still developmentally appropriate, but this little guy is not going to have the advantage that these 3 have of being in a transitional kindergarten classroom, and all 4 are still going to start kindergarten at the same time. So there was a lot of perceived disparaging. I don't know what I'm trying to say. There was a lot of the perception was of unfairness. Transitional kindergarten also began with nothing to do with transitional kindergarten. It began because the first grade standards started to be pushed down into kindergarten, and the kindergarten standards began to be needed to start somewhere. They did not have kids entering kindergarten who had done preschool, who had the soft skills to sit, listen, pay attention, follow directions, share, be in an environment that was different from their peers. And so what you had was essentially a decision that was made because teachers were reporting that really, if you're imposing higher grade level standards and younger children, we have to have more time to prepare. That was one argument for it. The other side of this argument is that childcare and preschool is very expensive. And so in a public school setting, they wanted to have more of a public offering for that 4-year-old year. Now it has changed so that the dates are that, so it used to be kindergarten 5 by September 1st, TK turning 5 before December 1st or December 31st. That's got changed. That had been changed. And now they've pushed it to where you turn 5 between September 2nd and April 2nd. And then by 2025, all 4-year-olds can start in TK, meaning if your student is an August 20th birthday, they were 3 on August 19th, August 20th they turn 4, that means in September they are eligible to go into TK. Let me tell you the problem that we see by putting all of these very young 4-year-olds in classes with almost 5-year-olds. And it's the same problem they were having with those kiddos, right? So you had the one that was a February birthday, the other 3 that were the older birthdays. And even though they were close developmentally, that's because that's February. But if I get a little further out, and now I'm at a July birthday down here, right? That 4.5-year-old is developmentally very different than the 5-year-olds up here. Think about it like a 3-month-old and a 9-month-old. A 3-month-old developmentally and a 9-month-old developmentally are very different stages of development. And yet, they are in the same peer age grade group if you follow that all the way through to kindergarten, right? So a 3-month-old is just barely keeping their head up. They're doing tummy time. They are not on solids. They've just had longer stretches of awakening and facial interactions and engagement. A 9-month-old usually has their first teeth, are sitting up, crawling, pulling themselves to standing, babbling a lot more. It's a very different development. And those developmental... Okay, wow, I really kept getting interrupted the other day when I was trying to do this video. So we're talking about the developmental gap between 3 months old, and 9-month-old, that 6-month period, then, and how it correlates to your 4 and your 5-year-old, right? So this brings up the just because they can doesn't mean they should factor. That is a big part of what SOACH does, right? So we are always balancing the science behind the developing cognition of a student and then the reality of the world that we live in, right? So we talk about that a lot when we're talking about, like, is homeschooling the right thing for you? Is hybrid homeschooling the right thing for you? Shouldn't all children have access to smaller class sizes and differentiation, but also recognizing the fact that we don't live in a culture that, like, supports, parental leave and a single income home where there's a lot of flexibility. So there's that balancing that we have to do, right? So I completely understand why by 2025, all 4-year-olds are TK eligible, right? It's not really TK at that point. At that point, it is a 4s class, although they are going to call it transitional kindergarten. That's going to be really interesting. And it's going to be interesting for a wide variety of reasons, because transitional kindergarten implies that there are pre-kindergarten standards that you are working on. But if you're just turned 4, like, you're basically learning how to, like, still wash your hands, still sit and pay attention, still keep a quiet body, and cooperate with your peers around you. But the bigger issue is that a just turned 4-year-old and a almost turning 5-year-old are literally 11 months apart in their developmental stages, right? So how they view time, how they count, how they have spatial awareness, how they develop soft skills it's a natural innate thing over time if kids are allowed to develop at their pace. So that's the first thing to keep in mind, is that why are we pushing 4-year-olds into class with 5-year-olds and calling it TK? Because either one of the two things is going to happen. You are either watering that down so that it is a developmental class for 4-year-olds to have space to develop those soft skills, in which case those older 4-year-olds turning 5, they're not TK kids, right? But likewise, when you're on that cusp between TK and kinder and you're like, oh, I'm a August 30th birthday, kindergarten eligible September 1st, you still run into that problem, right? 5 and 6-year-olds in class together, which it's still a lot, pretty far apart. According to the science of development in children, it's really not until they're almost all 6.5 to 7.5 that cognitive gap starts to close. And it's still not closing, right? There's still children who, if they're very, very young in their class, they might have to work harder because they haven't had time, or their brain and their body hasn't kind of caught up to. So it sort of comes down to, why are we doing this? What is the importance behind it? Is there a reason behind it? And in my opinion, don't put young 4-year-olds in a TK class. Don't put TKers in with kindergartners. If we can avoid it, we try not to put very young first graders, even who haven't had preschool, into a first grade class. And it's because socially and emotionally, they are still learning how to regulate. And we hear it all the time from parents where they're like, oh, they're great at their numbers at home, or they're great at listening to us at home. But the environment of a class is so different. They are having to regulate themselves all day long, or not. Sometimes they're not. And it's why sometimes when you go pick your kiddos up from, like, daycare or preschool, they'll just cry, or they'll just feel very like hyper, or very, maybe a tantrum is thrown in the car. It's because they're holding it together for the most part all day long, and it's exhausting, and you are their safe space, and in their safe space they can allow for the feelings of deregulation to happen. And that's okay. That's normal. That is part of that age. And when we have families who come and they say, my kiddo can do X, Y, and Z, they're doing it for you for a lot of reasons. They're in their safe space. It's performative often. They want to please their caretaker, and that's all normal. But when they get into an environment with other kids, with adult and authorities that they don't know and aren't right away off the bat comfortable with, we have to now spend time. That's what we do. You spend time getting to know each other, getting to know their process. And what we see time and time again is it takes the average age student or the older students maybe 8 to 10 weeks to get on board and understand what's happening with the schedule and understanding what's happening around them. And the little ones just aren't able to catch up or hang with what is happening. And we will then usually call parents in for a conference. We'll talk about it. We'll talk about what is our strategies to move forward. Do we want to have them leave the day early? Maybe they don't go for the whole day. Do they only come once a week? How can we help them move along? Because it ultimately, if it's not a behavior issue, we do want to see if we can help parents in this transition for them. But it is our experience that they're going to see this again and again, so that it's not going to just stay with them at 4. If they are the youngest in the class, it's going to happen again. Now, every child is different, right? So we then would like to have the chance to evaluate a student. Sometimes we'll put kiddos in class and we'll say, we're going to give it a month. We'll keep checking in. And if it doesn't work out, we'll have you withdraw. That's obviously not an ideal scenario, but if we don't know how they're going to be, especially if it's mid-year or something like that, we really want to make sure that they are placed appropriately and that they are set up for success. Academic confidence starts very young, and that starts with them being really comfortable with their soft skills first. So I know that TK and kinder, it's always been a question mark for us. We're always constantly working with families, conferencing with the teachers and administration to figure out who is placed best. Because there is years where we have littles come in and they are like, I'm shocked. I was like, I would have thought they were 5.5, maybe even 6, because of the way that they're able to regulate. That's fine. That's great. If that's your kiddo and they're young, no problem. Those are kiddos that we definitely want to constantly keep check on, because there is something about kiddos who are compliant that you always want to check in on. If that is their mental loop feedback of I'm compliant because that signals that I'm good, and that if any part of that then begins to affect them long term, we want to make sure our kiddos feel really confident and comfortable with who they are, that it's okay to advocate for themselves, to feel sad, to feel upset about something, and that it's okay to have an adult or an authority figure to help you through that. And that's something we can that gets more into behavior watching and signals and that kind of stuff, when we're just trying to preemptively get in front of the issue, any issues that we can see sort of starting to happen. It's why we added the Little Explorers class. So we added a Monday standalone 9 to 1 class for 3 to 5 year olds. This is a camp-like structure and class. This is to literally just introduce the ability to sit in circle time, to listen, to line up, to wash your hands, all in an environment that is intended to be playful, to be thematic, and to be hands-on and experiential and, you know, messy, working with, you know, Play-Doh and mud and sand and water and paints with less structure and regulation to it. You know, we're not having an end goal necessarily. The play is the end goal, is the lesson. And so we highly encourage our families who have younger 4-year-olds to enroll in that class first. And then let's keep an open conversation about where TK might fit for your kiddo. This obviously is very different than if we have a family who comes in who says, look, my kiddo's going to kindergarten in public school next year. I need something that helps prepare them. That's a bigger conversation. That's more individualized one-on-one. It's the same conversation we have to have families who are coming into kindergarten, but we know they're going to public first grade. It's a very different conversation because we're play-based and public school kindergarten is not play-based. So all of this to wrap this all around to say just because they can doesn't mean they should. Just because the district is doing it doesn't mean it's the right call. And it really is much more nuanced and individualistic than that for each student that comes in. But that it's something to be aware of, well, why are we now more strict with our TK than districts are? This is the reason why. And it's not that we're saying no, it's just that maybe it's not right now, or maybe it's a conversation we have ongoing. And again, I encourage the enrollment into the Little Explorers so that we can spend time with them, they can spend time with us, and we can all have those conversations together. So I hope that helps make decisions. I know it's not what people want to hear, but hopefully that helps.